Did you know that an officer can pull you over even if you actually didn't violate the law? We're going to talk about that. Hi, I'm Andrew Flusci, your Virginia traffic attorney. There's two basic mistakes that an officer can make when deciding to pull over a vehicle. The law kind of separates these two distinct things. One would be what we call a mistake of fact. And that's where if an officer knows the law and he simply mistakes what you were doing or what was happening and mistakenly pulls you over, even though you were actually doing everything legally. But from his perspective or his point of view, it was honest and reasonable that it looked like you were violating the law. So one example of this could be, maybe being in the wrong lane. Maybe the officer thought that you were in a turn-only lane and you went straight, but in reality you were in the straight lane, and so you didn't actually violate the law. The courts have held that that's a reasonable mistake, and the officer can still pull you over. It doesn't make sense, does it? That you didn't violate the law, however, the stop still gets upheld. And so anything they find from the stop, such as DUI or drugs or even driving on a suspended license, that can still come into evidence against you. The second kind of mistake is even more startling, quite honestly, and it's kind of a recent development with the Supreme Court case a few months ago. It's called a mistake of law. Before, as of even 2014, a mistake of law was not a good search or a good stop. So if an officer pulled you over based on what he thought was something you were doing illegal, and it actually wasn't illegal to do what you did, that was not a good reason to pull you over. However, now in the United States of America, it is okay for an officer to pull you over if you never violated the law and it's clear what you actually did, if the officer was reasonable and honest in believing that you did violate the law. So basically, these people who are sworn to uphold the law, who by and large do a great job, these folks are not held to the same standard as you and I in this respect. Because an officer can make a reasonable and honest mistake about the law, pull someone over, and even if we go back and read the law and say, actually, this person didn't do anything wrong, that search can still be upheld. That stop can be upheld in court if the mistake was reasonable. Now, if the mistake was so far-flung that the judge says that's not reasonable, then the search would be thrown out. However, you or I, if we violate the law, even having no idea what the law is, never having read the law, never having been sworn to uphold and protect it, if we violate it, ignorance is not a defense. We can't argue, well, Judge, I was reasonable. It was a reasonable understanding of what I was supposed to do as a human being or as a citizen, and so I should be let off. That's not a defense. You can't even argue that. Now, you can argue it for mitigation, perhaps, that you didn't intend to do anything wrong. However, it's not a defense for guilt or innocence. So that's what doesn't make sense for drivers, is that we're held to a different standard in many ways, and this is a very glaring example. So if you're pulled over and you think that you may have a defense based on the stop, you definitely need to contact me so we can talk about it and see what I can do to help you. If it's a mistake of fact, we definitely want to look into that and see, was it reasonable for the officer to mistake what he thought you were doing for something else? And if it's a mistake of law, we definitely have to look and see, was this a reasonable mistake? Or is this sworn law enforcement officer, should he or she have been held to a higher standard than that? And was it not reasonable? Should they have known the law better? So this is definitely a ripe area for argument in court, and it's something that all drivers need to be aware of, that our standard is higher, unfortunately, than officers. So you obviously have to drive carefully, know the law, and then of course be prepared to defend yourself if you're accused of something that you didn't do.